Apologies, action list. Right, we'll move on to action list on page 8 and 9. Action 389. Peter Hodgson, responsible for action, finance manager, and the updates there. It's all complete, so everybody's happy with that. Number 408, Richard Ace, operational manager, and that one's been marked complete. And chair to speak to Helen Smith regarding the way of planning enforcement data is presented, and that's ongoing. So can we have an update on that? Have you got one?
On how the data is presented?
Yeah.
I am going to present an update.
All right, so that's all right.
Maybe
Lovely.
I can pick that up then.
Yeah, well, okay, lovely job, thank you. 408, chair to liaise with chair of external about the email actions to councillors. Hodgson, that's ongoing, so we'll leave that going. So now it's the public contributions. Public contributions, you have 15 minutes period for the contributions. So who have we got?
So we've got Mr. Green and we've also got Mr. Puddy. Mr. Puddy will be speaking first because his he registered first with us.
Okay.
And you've got 3 minutes each.
3 minutes. Yeah, it says 15. Yeah, I thought it was a bit wrong. So Mr. Puddy, would you like to come and give us your 3 minutes, sir?
What do I do? Stand here?
Take a cue.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. As you know, I'm requesting that the council waives or reduces the fees for SS Freshspring in Bideford. The trust, which started in 2013, has been substantially supported by the Heritage Lottery Fund throughout, along with many grant-giving trusts and individual donors. However, the most difficult thing to raise money for is overheads, these being insurance and birthing costs. For a small charity, this is a considerable burden. Like many charities, we rely on donations, membership and grants, along with revenue earned by opening the ship and attending events. Sustainable incomes are only available to trading charities, and we're not there yet, I'm afraid. I've already provided considerable information regarding the activities of the Trust and the benefits to our community, which I hope you will have seen. By supporting us, the Council will be taking a significant step towards ensuring the Trust continues to deliver support and education, preserving this heritage for future generations, and most importantly, demonstrating local council support to our funders. Primarily, Heritage Lottery, who expect to see council support, indeed ask for it. SS Freshspring is of extreme national importance and the only charitably owned vessel in Bideford dedicated to providing education opportunities for all ages. Sparking interest in maritime heritage and careers in engineering, we work to support our community from those who are deprived, those in education, and those who are retired and in need of support and activity. You've seen evidence of this in documents already circulated. We employ a community engagement officer, which is a huge commitment for a small charity. With great success, she's reached out to every local school with STEM projects, providing vision and support for many deprived young people. I urge you to support my request to have the decision not to waive or reduce birthing fees made by CNR reconsidered. We would wish to use our limited funds to provide direct benefit to our community. Your commitment will be hugely appreciated. Support heritage tourism and education while simultaneously enhancing the cultural fabric of Bideford. Thank you for considering this request. Together we can preserve SS Freshring for the benefit and enrichment of our community. On a final note, I'm proud that together we gained prestigious Heritage Harbour status, and that the regeneration of Bideford, the Torridge and its heritage is an exciting focus for us all. I would, of course, be very happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Puddy. Any questions?
No, you can't ask any
Oh, you can't, sorry, that's all right. No, sorry, like I say, I've just jumped into this. I didn't know. So, all right, thank you very much.
Second public speaker.
It's Mr. Green.
And now Mr. Green.
Good evening. My name's Adrian Green. I wanted to raise a matter that was under item 408 on the minutes of your meeting of the 22nd of July and concerned waste collection from holiday homes. The audio of the recording available on YouTube was very poor. The chair can be heard, but other contributions are mostly inaudible. So I apologise if somebody said something which my comments now don't reflect. I think it was Mr. R. Harper who raised the question. I can't cover the subject in 3 minutes, it will be nearer 4. So yeah, I'll focus on key points and either ask the indulgence of the chair for another minute, or I can send a full report to the chair at the end of the meeting. I have a self-catering property on my farm. I received the letter sent out in early June concerning commercial waste collection. The chair's comments last time indicate that there was a measure of distress caused to recipients by the tone and the content of that letter. I think the words she used were people were downhearted. I personally responded to Mr. Haste, indicating a willingness to work with operational services to come to a pragmatic solution, given our isolated location and a regular need for a collection. I also pointed out that the letter didn't reflect the legal position because it said that being in receipt of small business rate relief required us to have a private waste carrier. And that isn't true. The letter failed to say that under the Environmental Protection Act 1990, the council has a duty to arrange a commercial waste collection if it's requested to do so, and this applies to all businesses. I didn't get any response, so I looked into the matter further. I don't know whether everyone's seen the letter, but one thing which was noticeable was although it said if you had any questions, please contact me, the letter was unsigned. Over a number of weeks, I asked Mr. Haste repeatedly for the name of the author. Eventually, he said the letter came from within my department. I asked for a specific name. Councillor Pennington also said he wanted to know the name. Yesterday, just before 5 p.m, after I said I was appearing before you and submitting a formal complaint, Mr. Haste changed his tune and said there was no one person. It was a collaboration between operational services and the legal department. You may feel, as I do, that it's extraordinary that the council would send out an intimidating and legally flawed letter to over 1,000 people and then nobody is willing to take responsibility for it. Moving on, the brown trade sack system that I think you discussed is for residual waste and could be said to be TDC arranging a commercial collection. That would be fine, except for the fact that since the 2012 controlled waste regulations were amended, what are formerly known as Schedule 2 businesses, including self-catering properties, which are in receipt of small business rates relief, can only be charged fees for waste collection and not for waste disposal. TDC does not reflect this in its waste sack pricing, and it also unlawfully adds VAT. Councillor Leather denied that there was any such distinction. Frankly, it wouldn't matter if it was only a few quid on a roll of brown sacks, but anyone familiar with self-catering properties knows that with efficient recycling, residual waste is a small proportion. It's the bottles, cans, plastic milk bottles, dry recyclables that also need collection in specific waste streams since the introduction of simpler recycling on the 1st of April. The EPA puts the obligation on the council to arrange a collection if requested to do so. Councillor Leather says, rightly, the brown sack is for waste, not recycling. When I contacted operational services concerning commercial waste
No, I
recycling,
should have finished there as you've done a minute over the
Okay.
three. all right, so, I'm sorry.
Right, well, I'll have to send you the full report then.
That's fine, lovely job, thank you.
It was very quickly, didn't it? 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Can't I ask for you to finish it?
Well,
You've
basically,
got absolute discretion to allow extra time.
well, how much longer would you be?
Well, I think probably another minute.
What does everybody think? I mean, basically, you have gone a minute over, and I think, you know, we can't push it any more, really, sorry.
You're going to put it to vote?
No, I can't do that, no, it's already been written, so I'm sorry.
No, I practiced, I got it in under 4 minutes.
So,
Thank you for
anyway,
your time.
thanks a lot. Is there anybody else for public speaking? No, lovely job, thank you. Right, now, item 5, declarations of interest. Members with interest should be refer to the agenda item described and the nature of their interests, as you all know the game. 6, ooh,
My apologies, Chair. Thank you. And my apologies to you all, because you were all obviously here on time, and I thought I got plenty of time at home.
well, I've got to item 6, so.
Do I take
Urgent matters brought forward by permission of the chair.
I don't have any urgent matters apart from my apologies to you all. So we move on to agreement of the agenda, part 1 and 2. I'd like to propose that the agenda, have I a seconder? Thank you. All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Oh, dear, sorry.
You okay?
Thank you very much. Yes, we look at the action list.
Done that.
You've done that?
Yeah,
On item
Oh,
8.
right.
plan and enforcement.
Right. I can sit back,
Catch a breath.
catch my breath, and welcome Helen Smith, who's come to present the planning enforcement plan.
Thank you, Chair.
Welcome, Helen.
Thank you. I'm just waiting, hopefully, for some slides to magically appear on the screen. Yes, there we go. Brilliant. Thank you all. So I'm just going to run through a few slides with just some updated statistics for you all. They're fairly consistent with the statistics that I've reported to this committee before. And just to highlight some of the key aspects of the draft enforcement plan, which was circulated to you all a week ago. So just to start, so looking at sort of numbers of cases that the Planning Enforcement Service has received over, well, since 2020. You'll see, as previously reported, that there was quite a sort of spike in numbers in 2021. So we received 356 and then sort of hovered around just over 300 over 2022 and 2023. A drop last year below 300, and so far in 2025 we're at 149. That's not as of exactly today, but that would have been some point in August. So I guess sort of factoring that up to 12 months, you're potentially looking at around 260 for this year, which would be a drop again. However, it's not an exact science. Just to say the when I come on to the sort of current outstanding cases, there is sort of still, well, it's not a backlog as such, but the current sort of caseloads also reflect action that's been taken on a number of these historic cases, so where there may be a notice that's served and is still active. So on that, looking at outstanding cases. So as of August 25, we're looking at 300 outstanding cases. In April 24, that was at 332. December 23, 446. So those dates correspond with when I've previously come and reported to this committee. Over 2024, the total cases closed was 344, and so far in 2025, 174 cases have been closed. In terms of the open cases as of August, so 300, a number of those are open cases just by virtue of there having been an enforcement notice served or some sort of action taken. It doesn't mean it's a case that has been submitted or made to the council, a complaint that hasn't been looked at. It's where if there's a notice that's been served, it still sort of features on the caseload because it is almost an active case. Many of those cases, a notice may have been complied with, some cases it may not, but it's just important to understand what that sort of 300 is made up of. In terms of key actions over the past, so this is a 12-month period, you'll see that we haven't served any breach of condition notices. Enforcement notices and planning contravention notices are the main actions that we tend to take as a service. So you'll see with enforcement notices, there's been, I think, 13 over the 12-month period. Planning contravention notices, which are almost sort of evidence finding questionnaires, for want of a better description, that are often the first stage of an investigation. You'll see we've served a number of those over the course of the last 12 months, and also some stop notices and temporary stop notices as well. In terms of appeals, when an enforcement notice is served, the recipient of that has a right to appeal, and they usually do, because it sort of delays the process or any sort of consequent action on them, and that's why planning enforcement can be a very lengthy process. We sometimes see appeals taking 12 to 18 months to run their course. We've had 13 appeals lodged, which corresponds quite nicely with the 13 notices that we've served, and it does tend to follow that appeals are lodged sort of within the timescale that's set. The appeal process is quite resource intensive. It involves various statements being submitted. It does take up a lot of officer time. Of those 13, we have 5 that are currently remain undetermined, so we're waiting for those decisions. We've had 7 determined, and we've actually had a few. That's quite a drop in our success rate, so 60% of those appeals have gone in our favour. And again, there's various reasons for that. Enforcement appeals are different to planning appeals. So with some of those, it's where an inspector has sort of felt that the wording of the notice may not be necessarily what it should be. And with any appeal that doesn't go in our favour, we sort of reflect on the key issues that have been raised by the inspector in that case. Where we do have appeals on enforcement, they are often, I say usually, very complex and can often involve hearings or public inquiries. So there's a lot of both time and cost resource involved in those. In terms of the wider government return statistics, so this is for the whole of the South West. So this lists all of the South West authorities. So it just gives a flavour for how, I guess, we compare with other South West authorities. So for Q4 return, we were sort of showing in terms of total actions taken at 5, which is quite low for us for a quarter return. You'll see that Cornwall and Dorset are significantly higher. Cornwall in particular at 96 there, and they have a sort of a process and procedure where they just serve a lot of planning contravention notices, and they're obviously a much bigger authority as well. And in terms of Q1, the most recent quarter, you'll see from there that we served a lot of planning contravention notices in that quarter. So we're at sort of 16 actions, which puts us sort of third in terms of number of actions taken. So that's across the South West. In terms of the statistics that have been reported in the QBR, of course, you will have seen that the enforcement statistics have sort of consistently been below the targets. And that in part has sort of prompted the review of the enforcement plan, which I will come on to. However, our support team leader, who deals with the sort of our data and our uniform system, has had a closer sort of more deep dive looking into this, because the figures themselves just felt incredibly low for the work that was being done. So Jen Slade has interrogated this a bit, and because of the nature of the uniform, the system we use, there's sort of a single coded suffix that is used to draw out the statistic, but that doesn't sort of cover all of the actions that have taken place. So updeck is that sort of code, but that isn't always used, and often sort of updates are logged as emails, telephone calls and letters. So in interrogating all the cases over April, as an example, it's gone from 13% to 80%. And equally, site visits within 14 days is actually 75% as opposed to the percentage shown. And this is partly due to that as a statistic not always being relevant. Often a case is highlighted or made after, by virtue of a visit, maybe looking at something else. So a visit has already happened. So the way that the data is set up doesn't actually account for that. So a deeper look on it has indicated actually 75% of those visits were within 14 days. So looking at that across the full year, so for 24-25, against the targets, so the top sort of table there at the far end, there was 100% of inquiries were acknowledged within the 3 working days against the 90% target. 42% of the high priority cases visited against a 90% target, and also 42% of the other cases visited against an 80% target. And then 74% of complainants being updated against a 100% target. Now, those figures haven't been adjusted with a sort of deeper interrogation. And looking at Q1, so April, May, June, which are the sort of stats that you have and the average, reflecting that closer interrogation, you see that the statistics are much better, the figures are much better, with an average being, again, 100% for acknowledgement of cases. We're still down on the high priority cases, which is at 33%, but you're looking at 68% for all other cases within 14 days and 79% for updates. Now, it's noted that members of the committee had sort of asked that actual figures be given rather than just percentages. So just as an example for Q1, so in April, looking at the high priority cases, so that was 3 site visits with 1 being in time. For all others, there were 16 visits, with 12 of those being within the 14 days, and updates to complainant, there were 15 updates made, with 12 of those in time. May, there were no high priority cases. There were 22 visits, with 14 of those within 14 days, and updates to complainants, there were 16 made in time out of a possible 20. And then looking at June, 2 out of 3 high priority visits were made within the 2 days, 9 out of 15 within the 14 days, and the updates to complainants, 11 within 14 days. And depending on where we go with the QBR, we can certainly include those figures alongside the percentages moving forward. So just now going on to the enforcement plan. Just a brief summary of what an enforcement plan is. Essentially, it's set out in national sort of planning guidance and policy that council should have an enforcement plan, and the intention is for it to set out the council's priorities for investigation, explaining what will be investigated and what will not, and outlining the general discretionary powers with regard to planning enforcement, so the tools available to us. It sets out how the council will prioritise responses to complaints and clarifies the timescales for action, also setting out the council's approach to handling planning related enforcement matters. So the current enforcement plan, the most recent update was October 2019. the document itself that was circulated, much of it is the same. The principles and the policy around planning enforcement hasn't changed, other than the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act bringing in some additional provisions. So the plan's been updated to reflect those. But what we have introduced is 3 different priority areas. At the moment, we have high priority, which essentially relates to trees, tree preservation orders and listed buildings, which is a very small proportion of the enforcement cases we have. And then everything else is sort of grouped together as medium. And looking at what other councils do and where it's working well, breaking down into 3 areas seems a sensible way to manage workloads and to ensure that resources sort of committed to those cases in a more timely manner that are going to have the greatest harm. So just to explain what the priority areas are. So highest priority is still anything relating to a heritage asset, so a listed building, but works of demolition or anything that's incredibly significant or causing substantial harm, protected trees and important hedgerows, and then activities that have the potential to cause irreparable harm to conservation areas, triple SIs, and the national landscape as an example. So that's sort of the highest priority. Medium priority, and again, these lists aren't exhaustive, but we felt it's helpful to put clarification in because it would then manage expectations of everybody wanting to sort of use the enforcement complaint process. So medium, it's looking at anything resulting in significant concerns for public health and safety, noting that where it's controllable through planning legislation, sort of recognising that the Environmental Protection Team have other legislation they follow, where there's a significant impact on the natural environment, significant unauthorised building work structures, uses and activities that cause significant disruption by reason of noise, smell, fumes, etc., again, which are controllable through planning legislation. Importantly, where immunity from enforcement action is due to lapse of time will come into effect shortly. So there's a 10-year period within which we can take action, but if it's beyond that period, it's then immune from enforcement. So we consider that there should be greater priority given to cases which are coming close to that timescale. Non-compliance with conditions and planning obligations where there is significant harm to amenity, building and other works in conservation areas, and other works causing less than substantial harm to heritage assets. And then the lower priority, and again, I won't run through all the examples because hopefully you've had a chance to look at them, but it's breaches that give rise to insignificant levels of harm and where any harm isn't going to increase or get worse. It's not saying that won't be investigated, but it's not that the timescales are slightly different. So you're looking at where there might be breaches where they're similar in nature and scale to an extant approval, minor breaches of construction hours, untidy land, etc. And in terms of how that process would work, very much as it does at the moment, once a breach is reported, it will come to the planning support team, who will have a bit of a greater role in triaging and identifying that priority at that stage. It would then go on to what we're calling initial site assessment investigation, because not all cases, the measure at the moment in your QBR is whether it's visited within 14 days, whereas not all cases need to be visited, or indeed they may have already been visited. And there's a lot more to an investigation, and it depends on a case-by-case basis. So this just gives more flexibility to measure against what needs to be looked at on a particular case. And then once the investigation has happened, the possible outcomes are no further action, informal action or formal action, and eventually the case being closed. So what we have introduced is sort of against the 3 priorities, timescales for these actions taking place. And these are what, if members agree and approve this, could be reflected in an updated QBR. So what we're showing for the initial site assessment, timescales for that. The only one that explicitly says a site visit is for the highest priority, because they would usually require a site visit, and then the timescale sort of work through. And there's an automatic case review at 6 months. Some cases may well have been closed before then, but it just having that set fixed point just ensures that everything is reviewed sort of regularly. Finally, just to sort of highlight the ongoing service improvement actions that we're undertaking. So we have created templates. We're looking to sort of update and improve the templates for planning contravention notices, section 215s, and the letters sort of updating complainants, so case closure, but also those updates. We have monthly meetings between planning enforcement and legal. We're looking to potentially extend the scope of those and maybe have one that's more of a case review, and then one, if as and when needed, where there's more specific things that need to be looked at around an enforcement notice, for example. We are going to look at better sort of joined up working with the environmental protection team's enforcement function, what best practice we can learn from each other, whether there's scope for sort of sharing of site visits, etc. In terms of staffing, we're looking to have a sort of clearer dedication of admin support. So the support team register all complaints at the moment, and that's going really well. But we feel there's additional admin support that could just mean that the two enforcement officers can be focusing on doing their reports and their site visits. So things like the updates to complainants could be managed by the support team. And we're ensuring that there's line management and oversight of the enforcement function, making sure these targets are met. The enforcement plan, as you know, is being reviewed, and on adoption of a new plan that will be implemented. That would then follow on that the QBR measures would need to be reviewed, and this would be in consultation with the lead member for planning, just to see how that performance can best be monitored through the QBR and what appropriate percentages should be for meeting those targets. We're also looking at the system review, so looking at the computer system we use for how we can better log the work that the team is doing and generate complainant updates. And this would also need to be updated to reflect any new QBR measures. We're looking at a major application monitoring sort of project. This could be appended to the enforcement plan. So this would look at a protocol for monitoring sort of conditions on major applications, so construction hours and compliance with construction management plans, landscaping, etc. Similarly with biodiversity net gain, which is still relatively new, but we are going to quite soon get to the point where we're at the first sort of 2-year monitoring of the first B&G statutory applications. And then we are also keen to have sort of make it as easy as possible for people to submit complaints, and actually have the form that they can access is online, but they have to sort of download it and fill it out. But whether we can, with the IT team, have something where it's much easier, where they just log that complaint online. And I think that's it, Chair.
Thank you very much. That seemed to be a really good, apart from the micro print,
Sorry.
even with my distance glasses, I was struggling a trifle.
Sorry, I can do, if there's anything you want me to zoom in on, I can.
But can you actually circulate those?
The slides?
Yes,
Yes,
please.
of course.
I think that would be useful,
Yeah.
so people can actually look at them.
Yeah.
Right, I'd like to invite any questions for Steve.
Yeah, basically, you say that they've got a 10-year immunity. Now, if a property or something have been appealed and it's failed and they've been told to take it down or whatever, and they don't, if they keep it for 10 years, does that mean they would be able to use it or
Yeah,
not?
so once an enforcement notice is served, that clock stops essentially. So that's why it's really important that where there is that risk of something that has significant harm becoming immune, that we're acting on that, resources dedicated to that as a priority. So yeah, once that notice is served, the timescale has stopped on that. And in terms of the 10 years, there used to be a 4-year and 10-year rule. The Levelling Up and Regeneration Act sort of got rid of the 4 years, but anything that was sort of built before the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act came in would still be subject to the 4 years. So there will be the odd thing that maybe has been built within 4 years or 3 years that we still have to be very mindful of that 4 years. But moving forward, everything will be 10 years.
Because we seem to have a plethora of people moving down here. They buy something online and they think they've got a good place. And you probably know one that I went to Parkham yesterday, and they've got one that they're getting very angry about. We've got one in Wolseley. It's just starting, and they've started off the campsite. Now they're it's happening. But Welcome is another place that they're trying, and they think, you know, if they go and take the time, they'll be able to get away with it. And it is so frustrating for people that do their job. But do you feel that, you know, you've got enough teeth to be able to do this now, or is it you wish you had someone else in your armaments to be able to do it?
I mean, in terms of the legislation, we have to work with what we've got. The process we follow, the enforcement officers will go out, they will do the initial assessment, and yeah, there's lots of sort of questions depending on a case by case basis. But you know, firstly, is there a breach? Is it immune? I think most wouldn't be immune. And then it's assessing, you know, what is that harm? Would it be granted permission or not? If it would, do we need to get a retrospective application so we can control things? So there's all of those sort of assessments that are made. Where it's felt actually this can't be addressed through a planning application and it's unacceptable, then that's when we would progress to an enforcement notice being served. And at that point, the clock would stop. As I sort of said when I was doing the presentation, with enforcement notices, you then have an appeal. So the process can take a very long time. If after an appeal, if it's upheld, and there's always a timescale for compliance within an enforcement notice, it's only at that point, if they haven't complied with the notice, that the next stage would be prosecution. Now, again, there's other matters that would need to be considered then as well. And as a planning team, it's not just us, it's very much working with the legal team as well to make those judgments and assessments throughout the whole process. So that, I mean, the legislation is there, but it's the test with planning enforcement is expediency, and is it in the public interest is what that key test is as to whether, you know, we go forward with action.
And
or not.
biodiversity, that's another added thing that you've got to check out
It
on.
is, it is. And you know, I'll be honest, we're still, that our process for doing that is still emerging, because we're not quite at that, because it came in spring of last year, and we're still a little way off that first sort of 2-year monitoring point for any applications that have been approved. So, but we need to get processes in place for that.
Well, thank you.
Councillor Gibson and then Councillor Bushby.
Do you feel you've got enough resource?
I think we do. I think with the sort of improvement actions that we've set out, I think there's better ways we could be working, and I think with all the improvement actions that we've set out, and actually the breaking it down into 3 priority areas, I think we'd quite like just to see, once that's implemented, how that looks in terms of getting the case numbers down. I think there will always in reality be what you may consider to be a large sort of active caseload, but because much of that are things where we've taken action and they're just sort of there, you know, on record. The additional admin support I think will be really helpful, and that will mean that the 2 enforcement officers can be focusing on the main tasks. I think that the closer working with legal, again, so it's one bigger team, it's that capacity in a greater sense, and also the potential for greater working with environmental protection that increases that overall resource. So I think we need to sort of embed these changes, get the system working better, and see where we are then as to whether we need an additional enforcement officer or part-time officer, or combination of officer and planning officer, would be my view.
Councillor Bushby.
Councillor Gibson has touched on the resource aspect of it, but I'm very much of the opinion that you don't have enough resource. I've been in your office before working with your enforcement officers, and when I see the length of time that it takes to do one of these cases and the investigation that they've got to do, etc., where you've got, you know, a significant backlog, whether it's 190 or whether it's 300, it's a huge number. And, you know, for 2 officers, whether they've got additional secretarial, you know, help, you know, 2 officers seems to me very, very light for the number of cases that you have to deal with. Particularly from, you know what my pet hate is the 215s, which you had on your screen there. Now, 215 notices, probably nearly all of the 215 notices you've got on file or working on now are probably the ones that I've instigated and have asked to be, you know, to have actions taken against them. You know, and I have to say, I don't necessarily think that it should be for individual councillors to bring this to officers' attention. They should be taking, I think, a more proactive approach to the issues that we face within the town. You know, you're only going to walk around the town centre just in Bideford without going to the other outlying towns to see some of the dreadful properties that we've got in really high profile, prominent cases. The one in High Street, you know about the old New Look store, and there's bits falling off the building all the time. I do appreciate they are sometimes very challenging to get to the bottom of who the ownership is, etc. But sometimes that may require an officer to spend a considerable amount of time chasing the building owners, etc., and holding them to account. Because, you know, it's been going on for years and years and years. And I'll probably still be, you know, going on about this in another 3 or 4 years' time, because you know, it's a very, very lengthy process, which, from my point of view, is extremely depressing. You know, when you see it on an almost daily basis. And you know, being a North Ward councillor, I'm the one that gets it in the neck from lots and lots and lots of local residents, not just in the email form. Sometimes I try and avoid walking through the town because I get my ear bent that much. It is a bit of a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think just on that sort of wider principle of a proactive approach, I think it would be unrealistic to sort of think we would ever have the resource to go out and necessarily look at conditions of buildings, monitor conditions on all planning permissions, and you know, I think it is fair to say that there is a reliance on that sort of partnership with parishes, with the community, with our councillors, bringing things to our attention. Officers, both enforcement officers and planning officers, do make complaints themselves when they're out doing other site visits. So there is that level of sort of proactivity that happens. And I think working with certainly the environmental protection team who have an enforcement function, that's something we can expand more. It is a lengthy process. I think getting more officers wouldn't necessarily change the length of time that the process takes. I appreciate you could have more of these things being actioned. But we always have to sort of look at it and think, ultimately, if you are taking action, it's that we are going to go down ultimately a prosecution route if we don't get the outcomes we want. We do always start with negotiation on any case, because often we do well to get outcomes just through going and talking to somebody, the owners, whoever has undertaken the works. And, you know, often that can work and things are put back to how they should be, or an application submitted. I think it's, I suppose it's what that aspiration is, an expectation of how proactive as officers we can or should be. But I think certainly we would accept that. I would hope with sort of smarter working we can get those cases down. But it won't necessarily shorten the process itself.
No, but I
totally hear what you're saying.
I take the point that you make about, you know, the initial letter when it drops through, you know, a business premises or a residential premises, when they see the letter from Torridge, you know, informing them that, you know, they've got a property that has been identified as being, it needs work. The ripple effect, a classic example was the bottom of the High Street in Bideford. You know, the ripple effect, I'd never seen as much scaffolding go up. Within about 3 months, there was scaffolding all up the left-hand side of the High Street. So it does work.
Yes.
That's why, you know, that's why it's important to make that initial contact and get those letters sent out.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions?
Chair, am I allowed to ask a question?
Is this Councillor Hames? Yes, I'll indulge you on this occasion.
He's a member of CNR.
Oh, wait a minute. Sorry, correction. You have to sit down. You're a member of CNR, so you can't interrogate
That's why
internally.
I'm asking when I'm allowed to ask a question.
No, I've had advice, sorry, from... So I can't indulge you because I'm not allowed to. Councillor Bright.
Thank you, Chair. Earlier you said that some of the data we look at, it doesn't actually capture an accurate reflection of what's actually happening. So how do we change that for the future references? Is that what's happening already, or is it?
It will, yeah. So and it shouldn't have been happening. And I think, I think in part it's due to the almost simplistic nature of that QBR measure that just sort of talks about site visits within 14 days, whereas we don't always visit site. Sometimes the complaint has arisen out of a site visit that's happened, and it's a system issue really with how we're inputting things into the system and how that data is being pulled out. So that will all be looked at as part of, if the enforcement plan is agreed and adopted, we'll need to look at actually how do these new priorities and the timescales, how can we ensure that our system is fit for purpose to ensure that effective monitoring, so that our enforcement team has something to be working and performing against, and you as a committee can, they can be held to account that we are sort of meeting those timescales. But at the moment, the measure doesn't really reflect the work, and the system isn't really geared to reflect that. And it has been going on for too long with those consistent small percentages coming in, which don't actually reflect things, but do still highlight that we aren't meeting that 14-day target, even with the greater interrogation. So
that's how are we actually going to change it?
Well, so
is there a plan to change the actual
the measures or the
system for
recording
that we visited?
Yeah, so I think
we'll say that we visited / no visit necessary, kind of tick box. And then
so what the draft enforcement plan shows is sort of the action rather than a site visit. It's called initial site assessment / investigation, and that can include a site visit, but it could also just be, because often we do get really comprehensive complaints come in where there's videos, there's photos, and actually it doesn't always need a site visit, but there's then a sort of more desktop review. We check planning history, we check permitted development rights. So there's lots of different things that comprise that investigation, and it changes according to what the complaint is. So that would be the measure. It's a broader measure of that action taking place, and then what we have is the corresponding timescales, depending on whether it's a highest, medium, or lower priority, as to when it has to be completed by. And then after those dates, there's then another date that's an update to the complainant. I wouldn't claim to be an expert with how we address that in the system, but our sort of system admin within our department and the IT team, I hope, will be able to ensure that the system is there ready, to extract that information in that way.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure we're not keep treading the same path every single
Yeah,
month.
and you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
all.
So it's a combination of making sure those measures are more realistic, but then the system is, and then also that the team are inputting it properly. So that's key. Okay.
Thank you, Helen. I think one of the things that impressed me was one of your slides, which I could read because the print was a bit larger, with what your plan was to actually a summary of all the elements that you were going to address.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is it possible can you go back and just flash that up? Lovely.
Is it that one?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think this actually sums up what you're going to do to improve enforcement. And these are many of the issues that have been raised quite frequently by councillors, because as Councillor Bushby says, we're on the front line when it comes to our community saying, what on earth are you doing about these things? So it is important that we can actually see what your improvement actions are. Now, as a committee, I think we need to actually monitor how you're achieving these improvement actions. And whether we've just been presented QBR1, whether we ought to look at when we get QBR3 as to how you're achieving and what you've done, and ask you for a further report. And would that satisfy committee that we're monitoring this appropriately?
Yeah.
It gives you a bit of time to get some of these things sorted. I think one of the things that we did mention last time was, please, can we have numbers rather than percentages, which you've obliged us with? Because I think that makes, when you start talking about 1 out of 3, instead of 33%.
Yeah.
You know, it does make a lot more sense, and it takes away some of the issues that of concern. So do we need to recommend that this report goes to?
My understanding, Chair, is that it has to be agreed by full council.
Yes.
I know that happened with the last one, but it needs to be adopted
Somewhere.
somewhere.
Chair, a check when it needs to be
Yeah.
adopted, but on your forward plan, when you come to that later, you can put in a date for Helen to come back and report an update.
Right.
So if you're saying this is 6 months' time, whenever the
Yeah.
appropriate committee.
Yeah,
Okay.
because if it has to go to full council, I
But
guess.
does this
that's
plan
the
have
end
to
of
be
it.
adopted formally by
We'll-
full council?
Chair,
Maybe
we
we
just need to
check.
check what the process is.
Right, fine.
I know it had to go somewhere, but I wasn't sure where. So,
It may be CNR, which we.
Right.
but I guess it's having the endorsement, I suppose, for this draft to then go where to whichever
I'm
council.
happy to make a recommendation that this returns to us when QBR3 is presented with a further update report about how the action plan is being delivered. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you. All those in favour? It's all of us, I think.
It's unanimous, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Helen.
Okay.
And it was a long time coming, but it was worth waiting for. So
Thank you.
good luck with the improvement plan. Thank you very much. Right, now it gives me great pleasure, and I've got my breath back, which is a great relief. Thank you, Helen, for that. To introduce QBR1, pages 10 to 45, and to ask our Service Improvement Officer to talk to the report.
Thank you, Chair. I'm hoping that I've been able to do it. Just waiting for the PowerPoint to come up.
That's all right.
Showing it like that. No, it's not me.
I think that's on your iPad. There you go.
That was my fault, completely. Okay, so here we are for quarter one from April to the end of June. This is just a reminder of our performance management cycle and where the QBR fits within the whole process. And again, the 15 councils that we're benchmarked against when we look to see how our performance is doing, ranging from Staffordshire and Derbyshire to 6 councils in Devon. And you'll remember that they changed for quarter 4 last time. So on to some of the highlights that have happened in this quarter. We had 2 local independent businesses that won 6 months rent-free in the Pannier Market. And the photo is of the Pannier Market Hall in Great Torrington, which has had a makeover and looks rather splendid now. And the benchmarking, you can see the number of enterprises within Torridge. We're ranked 4th from the bottom. So that sort of tells you the challenges that happen within our rural area. On theme 2, so as it was reported in the press that the council has been awarded a grant to help meet the housing delivery targets. And the photo is of Councillor Hackett, who ended up on Spotlight, trying to stop the vandalism of the life-saving equipment, which was also in the press and on social media. There'd been a bit of a problem with that at the reservoir. And the benchmarking is we're mid-table for new dwellings, which moving forward will possibly show an increase with all the new development that's taking place within the district. And theme 3, Northern Boroughs have continued to organise their wellbeing walks, which were well attended, and events over the Easter holidays too. Westwood Ho gets their blue flag status for the 22nd year in a row, and the photo is of the 3 new electric vehicles that has been purchased. The benchmarking, you can see we do quite well with our recycling rate here in Torridge. And on theme 4, the photos of councillors and officers coming together to commemorate VE Day, and there's been a couple of gatherings to show our support this year. And if you have a look at the table, it's the council tax paid on an average Band D property, where we rank in the middle, which is always good. And I will now pass over to Sally.
Thank you.
There you go.
The first slide shows the high-level position with a forecast favourable net variance of 434,000 to the year end. The projected adverse variance of 298,000 includes 222,000 relating to salary costs, which then are offset with favourable variances of 732,000, with bank interest projected to be 43% higher than the original budget set by 600,000. The key significant adverse variance for the current financial year relates to staff costs of 222,000, of which 204 relates to agency costs, which is a direct result of covering vacancies and providing additional resource to deliver outcomes from unbudgeted grant income received. And the favourable variances are from the bank interest and homelessness costs. Bank interest rates are still slightly higher than we expected, and the total on deposit is 20 million more than last year because of the Community Regeneration Partnership grant funding. This additional bank interest was not incorporated within the budget for the year, as it was not guaranteed at the time the budget was set in November 24. The projection of 425,000 of income from the Community Regeneration Partnership is quite prudent and could increase dependent upon the drawdown by the relevant projects. And the cost of providing temporary accommodation is forecasted to be favourable by 80,000, and that's due to reduction in the number of placements in the first quarter. Looking at key income streams, car parking and Northern Boroughs income is up on last year and budget, which is presumably due to the increase in our visitor numbers and within the improved weather conditions, and benefiting also from Easter falling in April this year, unlike the prior year. Rental income is currently up against budget, but these figures are slightly skewed by upfront payments. Planning income is also favourable. Planning application is slightly higher in the first quarter than we had expected, but we will assume that will level off as the year goes on. Harbour and pilotage income is up on both budget and prior year due to 3 large ships we received during the first quarter. The large ship income had not been incorporated within the 25-26 budget, as there's no certainty of being able to continue to use the new quay dock, as the Navantia takeover was not completed until after the budget process was completed. And also Cromlech House in Torrington was closed for a period during the first quarter to undertake essential repairs and refurbishments, which resulted in the hostel income being slightly less than the prior year and budget. And most other lines are close to budget. With respect to salaries, well, the salary expenditure at the end of the first quarter was below budget, as the 25-26 pay award was not settled until August, which was then backdated to April. Agency staff, which makes up about 5% of the total cost, was comparable with last year. And at the end of June, there were 16 vacant posts, of which 2 was being covered by agency staff. 1 of those posts had a new starter in place. 2 had interviews scheduled. 5 were being advertised and 8 had not reached the advertising stage. And Refuse had 3 vacant posts. As stated, agency staff is 5% of the total staff costs, but of the agency spend, Refuse makes up 59% of that cost. As a snapshot, at the end of June, there were 16 agency staff, 14 in refuse services, and 2 providing short-term resources in other departments. And as this is just a snapshot, this they'll go up and down throughout the year and does not necessarily represent the total number of agency staff used throughout the year, but gives us an idea of current numbers. And also, you may note that 14 agency staff in operation services, but only 3 vacancies, but this could be for various reasons, such as covering sickness, maternity, paternity leave and holidays. And as you can see from the vacancy graph, it does show the trend in vacancies, which is currently on a downward trajectory. The graph and table for temporary accommodation shows the current costs of providing temporary accommodation to persons who are currently homeless. The TDC-owned units are hostels and modular accommodation units, public sector leases, which are properties which tie to leases from landlords, and then there are spot purchases, which would be the nightly paid accommodations such as hotels. A real key point to note, there was a 30% reduction in the number of placements as at the 30th of June in comparison with the prior year, from 65 down to 45. And with the most expensive accommodation, spot purchases reducing to 7 compared to 18 last year. With respect to capital and reserves, this shows that we spent 2.698 million out of the capital programme budget of 40.678 million for the year. And up to the end of the first quarter, key capital expenditure has been on the ACMIT project, operational centre, Holsby Leisure Centre and the disabled facilities grant. The gross capital budget for 29 to 29/30 is 21 million and the total programme budget is 62 million. The gross cost is the cost of storage after other sources of funding, e.g. grants. With respect to reserves, the council holds various reserves earmarked for revenue and capital purposes. And at the start of the year, this was 6.4 million of revenue reserves, which also included the draft surplus for the prior year within the budget stabilisation reserve. The draft surplus will be presented to the C&R committee next week on the proposed allocation. And then there was 9.5 million of capital reserves, and we have since put into reserves a further 1.166 million and spent 126,000. We've committed spend of 1.679 million for revenue and 10 million for capital, gives us a balance of 4.8 million in revenue reserves prior to the reallocation of the 25-26 surplus and 396 in capital reserves. With respect to investments, we had at the end of June 35 million in short-term treasury deposits, with the maturity dates of each deposit noted on screen. The short-term deposits include a total of 20 million grant received in advance for the Capital Regeneration Partnership Programme. In addition, there's 8 million in the deposit account, giving a total deposit of 43 million. There's currently one green ethical investment held with Lloyds Green Investment, and in line with the Bank of England bank rate, which is reducing currently at 4%, this is also reflected in the downward trajectory in the interest rates being offered for short-term treasury deposits being invested by TDC. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. Any questions? I'll leave this. No questions at all?
Can I just say it was a very well presented report?
I think,
Thank you very much.
Very detailed, yes.
Thank you.
I'd like to congratulate everybody because there are some very positive signs, especially with the work that the homelessness team are doing in their spend in reducing the figures. It's not just about not putting people in B&B, but it's about the proactive work that the team undertake to actually try and resolve the issues. I think if, our legal eagle will tell me whether I'm correct in my thinking, but I think the private sector has relaxed a little in the way we're being able to access and refer people into the private sector, whereas 12 months ago it was very, very difficult to access private rented accommodation. So congratulations to them, congratulations to the team that have put this together. And I think it's a very good start for the year. So thank you to all the officers and those who've taken part in this QBR. Now, I was late, so I'm not sure. Have you answered the questions? Did you have those?
No,
Or
that's the next bit, Chair, so the supplementary
Yeah.
paper.
Yeah, so I can refer, it's all right, I thought I might have got away with that having been dealt with. So if you turn to your supplement, either on your iPads or on paper, and we'll go through, and as I do, I don't read everything here, because I think you're all capable of reading this. I'll put the right glasses on and then that life might be easier. The first question was from Ian Harper about the variance in staff wages. Are you satisfied with the response?
Somewhat confused.
Would you like a further explanation?
Yes, please. The variance, is this projected annual projection?
This is the annual projection.
It's not the quarterly, that's not
Correct,
actual
yes.
quarter.
No.
Right. The other thing as well is clearly that agency costs is when you look at it, we've got the 100,000 backstop, but it will still be over £100,000 above budget. So the budget was quite short.
Right.
Any observation on that, please?
I think what sometimes happens, we receive grant income, which we then have to engage the services of agency staff. The grant income isn't budgeted and neither is the agency cost. So what you sometimes see that the agency cost will be in excess of budget to supplement that grant income received.
Okay. Thank you. It's another question from you on page 6. Building control down again against last year's budget. Have our charges increased from last year? Are we getting work from the new builds? Now, there was a very lengthy and thorough response to this. Have you any supplementary questions to this? Thank you. And another one from Mr. Harper. I think this is this adverse salary variance again. We've got the backdated pay award, which has been included in the August salaries. So did that explain? Thank you. And another one.
Yeah, some good questions.
You do. Agency backfill, leisure reserve, project management, some questions on page 7. Are you satisfied with the response?
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Now, I'm in a quandary here because Councillor Hames sits on CNR, but we haven't precluded him from these questions and he has been answered.
Yeah, Chair, we should have picked this up as the questions came in rather than let them go through the system, I guess, because there's no opportunity for Councillor Hames then to come back.
No. As we made this mistake, can we allow him to speak?
Just want to give you some information, basically, Chair.
Sorry.
I had an email from Stacey today saying that.
Had an email from whom?
Sorry, I had an email from Stacey Dorey today in response to my query whether I can ask supplementary questions on the QBR, given that I'm a member of CNR, and I was told by Stacey that as long as they're general questions which don't relate to any decision made at CNR, then she doesn't see any reason why I couldn't ask the question.
Could I just quantify that, Chair? So, Councillor Hames,
by all means.
I did say that. The agenda had already been published, the questions had already been asked. So I think, quite rightly, CNR, ONS should stay entirely separate. You will have to make that determination, I think, as to whether you are in a difficult position when you ask these questions, because the difficulty, as I've from our point of view, is we can't track back exactly what decisions might have been made by CNR. So the onus is really on you to make sure that you aren't conflicted when it comes to asking these questions. I mean, it's not ideal, but there you have it. And you know, we have a scrutiny function and CNR function for that reason. But it is right. The agenda was published with those questions on, so
I'd just like to make the point that we've been encouraged by the chair, all councillors, to ask questions, which I would assume includes anybody who's on CNR or whatever. So I mean, I suggest that there needs to be some guidance and resolution to this matter. Sort of published and conveyed to all members as to what the situation is, because it's obviously, I mean, I'm not the first person to raise this matter, so it's obviously some concern.
I think it's a difficult situation. I think when the chair, myself, encouraged people to ask questions, it related to giving people the opportunity who didn't sit on internal scrutiny but weren't represented in any other committee to have a voice. I believe that anybody who is a member of the CNR committee has the opportunity to raise things at the CNR meetings. So I was somewhat surprised by the number of questions that came from this source. We have got to, I think, look at how we handle this in the future, because it's frustrating for, I can see where Councillor Hames is coming from. He's taken the trouble to write these questions and then to be told, well, sorry, you can't speak, or it's not appropriate. So I think in between now and our next meeting, we need to sort out our process for dealing with questions. So that's what I will be recommending from this meeting today, that we have a review of the process for dealing with questions. And I think it's a difficult one, and I will throw this over to our head of legal.
I mean, the Constitution is clear from an internal or external scrutiny point of view. You have the power to call in decisions that are made by the CNR committee. You've got one tonight, actually, case in example. And from an officer's perspective, we don't necessarily know who's made what decision and when, but you're risking being sat on one committee making a decision and then coming to the scrutiny committee and scrutinising that decision. And then you have to ask, well, is that proper scrutiny if you're making the decision and then coming over and marking your own homework, because that's effective. So that's what, we did have discussions previously about whether we just have the one scrutiny committee, because obviously this had been raised previously with the amount of people that can substitute from each committees, and I think members were clear that they wanted the two scrutiny committees. But I think if you want to come to scrutiny and scrutinise decisions, your option is to not sit on CNR. And from an officer's perspective, obviously we can't make that decision, and that has to be made by members.
I think members need to make that decision as to how this process will work in the future. And I think that we need that endorsed by all members as to accepting the roles of members sitting on CNR and members sitting on scrutiny committees. So if we move on, Mr. Dengate submitted a question, but he's not here tonight. He sent his apologies. There's a further question from Mr. Harper about how many companies have relocated, or are you happy with that response? I
find it somewhat disappointing that we
Yes.
don't know how many companies are coming in and out with investment. actually, do we have an inward investment policy yet, or
I'm going to look
strategy?
at,
Because I know that we're supposed to have done it from 2018. North Devon Plus was supposed to actually start developing it.
yeah.
The straightforward answer is no, we don't have one. It was sort of wrapped up and discussed actually in the adoption of the economic strategy and the need not to do that. So I think that decision was superseded. But no, we don't have one. That doesn't mean that we don't have inward investment activity going on. The problem is, I'm not sure how you capture that statistic. I don't know that there's a way of monitoring a business relocating from somewhere else to here that we could capture that data. That would be an interesting stat, I guess, but I'm not sure how we would catch it.
I was just looking at the fact that we could actually understand where the second homes were, but surely we could actually recognise when businesses start paying rates, business rates.
Yes, I would
We
have.
can also recognise when businesses close down.
Yeah.
Surely that's one way of actually capturing it.
I'm not sure that's inward investment, though, Chair. That's something else. But anyway, we can discuss this.
Well, I would have thought, as you're saying, registering to be responsible for paying business rates for a new business that you set up in the town.
That's
Or whatever.
Chair, that's business startup, not inward investment. Inward investment is about bringing money into an area from another area or business growth within an area. What we're talking about here is business generation, where you're actually starting a business up that wasn't a business before, but is now registered as a business.
What I'm looking at, so this is surely the first basis in which you actually start to analyse it and actually start to understand what is a brand new business that's starting up here, which is a growth business, or what is actually a business that's come from outside. Surely that's one method of actually doing it.
It's something we'll need to work on because we don't have that data.
At the moment, it's not available to us, and it might be considered in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's something, Chair, that working in conjunction with North Devon Plus, who do an awful lot of business support and have an awful lot of contact with pre-startup and startup businesses. They have data, but it's not extensive, and I couldn't say with any confidence, given the data that I have, that this is the number of businesses that have relocated into Torridge, or this is the economic impact of any inward investment into Torridge, because it's not a trustworthy database.
It's easy for the big ones that move into the area.
Yes.
Yeah, we know about
But
that.
when you've got lots of little micro businesses, that's the difficulty. Yeah. I'll take your point.
Right.
Quite interesting when we have the Apple Doors new clean energy. That'll be hopefully new inward investment.
True.
Bring it on.
Right, well, thank you for the questions, and we will resolve this situation before the next internal scrutiny meeting. Now we move on to item 10, which is the annual report, which has been prepared for your edification by the outgoing chair, Councillor Newton. And I would like to commend this report to you. I hope you've all read it and seen what wonderful things we did in the last 12 months. It was a very comprehensive report, and I trust you all, whether you've got any questions you wish to raise on this. I can't guarantee I'll be able to answer, but I will try. And I'd like to thank Lauren for her contributions to the preparation and work that's gone into this report. So do we have any questions on the annual report? No? Right, well, I would like to recommend we accept this report. We need a recommendation, don't we, to accept the annual report? No, we don't.
We can just note it, Chair.
Right.
Just note in.
Is everybody happy that we note this report and send our thanks to Councillor Newton for his contributions? Thank you. Right, moving on again. Consideration of the forward plan. Now, we've already said that we have got something that we would like to add to the forward plan with looking at in QBR3 the service improvements actions from the enforcement plan. So can we add that to the meeting in
February.
February. I'm frantically looking for the piece of paper with. Sorry.
Page 63.
Thank you. Very handy having people here who know what the page numbers mean. Right, is everybody satisfied with what is going to happen at our next meeting, which is the asset management plan, planned and responsive? That will be ready, I take it, Sean?
Yeah, Harvey Gardner will come along, the estates manager.
Right, and the housing delivery plan, I think Helen's gone, hasn't she? Yeah. Well, I'm sure that will be ready because they've been working on that, and I've seen a draft, and that is shaping up really well. I think it's going to go to
Chair, we agreed to go to a full member briefing.
briefing, yeah.
The next available one, which isn't next week, is the one after.
Yeah. So will this fit in? Is there one before the 21st of October?
Probably not, Chair, because they every other month. So the one for September has already got 2 substantive items on, so it'd be the following one, which would be November in that case.
Right, so should we be actually moving the housing delivery plan to the December meeting?
Yes, Chair, and Helen can give an update.
Right, so is everybody happy for that? If we're having a briefing, a members' briefing, I can confirm the actions that are actually being delivered through their business plan, having some very tangible results. So I'm confident that we can hang on until December to see that. So if we move that one to the December one. Grounds maintenance 18-month update, and QBR2 and the housing delivery plan. We've got nothing on the 13th of January. Is that left clear for budget?
Chair, there's a separate meeting for
Right.
budget for internal scrutiny.
So the 13th of January, would it be a good idea to move the grounds maintenance?
Chair, it was a general update from the operational manager, so I'm sure January would be probably a better date.
Well, I'm just...
And the manager's nodding at me.
You have the whole of Christmas to do your report, Richard. It's just, I think it's much better if we focus on a small number of things and examine them carefully, rather than overcrowd ourselves and get to the stage where you're losing the will to live by 8 o'clock at night. So we'll move that one then, please, to the 13th of January. Thank you. And I must point out, I apologise, we've asked for the meeting time to be changed on the 2nd of December, because I sit on the housing CCA meeting, and they have their meetings on the same day at 10 o'clock in the morning. So it will be 6 p.m. and I will make sure I'm not thinking it's 6:30 p.m. So please note the change there. You happy for that? Thank you. Anything anybody wants to add to the forward plan? No? Anything from the team you think we ought to be doing?
We're quite happy with the amount we've got.
Yes, yeah.
Thanks, Chair.
I know, yes, I'm
Chair.
feeling like that myself.
Chair, if I could, when we're talking about the forward plan, are we going to be looking at recruitment for our new operational services centre when that opens, and the implications that the current staff members within that department are receiving in remuneration? Is that something for the forward plan? No?
That's not something for scrutiny consideration, Chair.
I would say that was an
For another time then.
operational decision.
Yeah.
you suddenly decided you wanted to recruit 50 more people, it might be a decision that had to be reached by CNR and we would scrutinise.
Yes, Chair, that's right.
Right. Nothing else on that matter? So thank you. I now vote that the public be excluded from the remainder of the meeting, and we move into part 2 of the meeting. Pardon?
You're proposing.
I'm just done that. I'm proposing it. Anybody second it, please? All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair.